The hum of the courtroom settled around me like a physical weight pressing down. With every second I sat rigid, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. The image of her face replaying over and over behind my closed eyelids. Tanya, my wife, or at least the woman I once thought I knew. The divorce proceedings had been ugly from the start. Her lawyers' vultures tore apart the life we had built together, hoping to bleed me dry. But I knew what to expect. They tried to paint me as the villain, the one at fault for the end of our marriage for the last 4 months. I've been surviving on nothing but the bare minimum. I hadn't slept or eaten. Just existed. When they told me she'd moved on, I assumed it was to a new place. Maybe back to her mother's. Not that she had moved on with someone else. But today was different. Today she would have to face me and answer for the accusations I'd made against her adultery. The word felt like a punch to my gut when I whispered it to my lawyer, not because of the word itself, but because it was now undeniable truth. I never wanted it to be true, but here we were when Tanya spoke to the judge. Her voice was calm, almost serene. "I have nothing to hide, Your Honor," she said, her gaze never once wavering in my direction. I wanted to scream, to claw at the composed facade she wore so effortlessly. How could she sit there with such confidence after everything? The audacity was staggering. My lawyer, Mr. Thompson, gave me a small reassuring nod, and a treat to Cal myself. I trusted him. He was meticulous, thorough, he had promised me the evidence would speak for itself. Then the courtroom door opened, and a man I hadn't seen before entered, tall with a serious face and tired eyes. He carried a simple manila envelope. It was Mr. Ramirez, the private investigator. I had hired. Tanya's face drained of color when she saw him. Her hands, which had been still moments before 4, began to tremble. A small gasp escaped her lips. It was the first crack in the perfect mask she'd been wearing. It was the proof I needed. A knot in my chest tightened. This wasn't a victory. Not yet. But it was a start. I watched, my eyes fixed on her. As Mr. Ramirez approached the stand, led by Mr. Thompson, he was sworn in, and with quiet authority began to detail his findings. The judge, a woman with a face hardened by years of hearing stories like mine, leaned forward. The room fell into a tense silence as Mr. Ramirez spoke of surveillance-coded messages, secret meetings in hidden corners of the city, the late-night hotel rendezvous, the weekend getaways. With each word, I felt the rage rise again, sharper, more painful than ever I had known about it. But hearing the facts laid out so coldly felt like being stabbed over and over. The man Tanya had been seeing was Jerome, someone I had met, a friend of a friend. That hurt. More than anything she had been living. This lie right under my nose. I saw the color rising in her neck, creeping up her cheeks. She fidgeted in her seat finally, looking at me with wide eyes, panic mixing with what might have been. Shame. Her world was crumbling, piece by agonizing piece. Mr. Thompson asked her to admit to the evidence. A set of photographs approved by the judge were passed around, starting with the judge, then to her lawyer, and finally to Tanya. The photos weren't explicit, but they didn't need to be. The look she shared with Jerome, the way they touched, the intimacy, it all spoke volumes. A story of betrayal that I had only suspected until now. But now it was undeniable. Tanya refused to look at the photos. Her lawyer, who had been all bluster and arrogance just moments before now, sat silently in defeat. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her, waiting for some explanation, some rebuttal. Finally, she found her voice. These are taken out of context," she stammered, her voice trembling. "They aren't what they seem." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Oh, please. Tanya, don't insult everyone's intelligence. I've lost everything. You have no idea what you've done." I tried to keep calm, but the rage bubbled over. I saw her glance quickly at me and then look away, unable to meet my gaze. Mr. Thompson continued with his questioning. "Mrs. Carter, Can you explain the multiple trips to the Ocean View Hotel registered under the name Mr. and Mrs. Davis? Can you explain the text messages on your phone discussing meeting Jerome there? These were deleted, Mrs. Carter, but Mr. Ramirez managed to retrieve them. She remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. The judge, her expression unwavering, turned to Tanya, Mrs. Carter. She said, her voice quiet, but firm. Do you have anything to say about these allegations? Tanya broke. I don't know what to say. She whispered, the last shred of her confidence crumbling. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in what felt like forever. I saw not the woman I'd married or loved, but a stranger, a liar, a cheat. The woman I thought I knew was nothing more than a phantom, a mirage. Born from lies, the judge ruled in my favor. The divorce would proceed with a fair distribution of assets. Tanya's deception was now laid bare for everyone to see. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was the validation of my pain, the acknowledgement of the betrayal. It was justice later. As I walked out of the courtroom, I saw her standing near the entrance. Her head bowed. The bravado that had been so prevalent, so offensive, was gone. She looked small, pathetic, alone, and somehow, that gave me a sense of satisfaction. I walked past her without a second glance. The bitterness still lingered, a cold weight in my chest, but it no longer consumed me. I knew she was now facing the consequences of her actions, the shame she had earned for the first time in months. I took a deep breath, slowly, exhaling all the pain and anger that had built up over the last 4 months. I might have been broken, but I was beginning to rebuild. The first step was walking away from her. I left her standing there, a ghost of the woman she had pretended to be. I felt no triumph, no joy, only a profound sadness. Sadness for the life we could have had, the love we never truly shared, and the lies she chose to live. But as I stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, I knew one thing for sure: I had finally been set free, and now I could begin to rebuild my life, a life where I would choose more carefully, where someone would value me. And the relationship we shared, it would be a long road, but I was ready to take the first step.